Today on Locked On Rockies, looking back at the first manager for the Colorado Rockies, his legacy, Don Baylor, and a wonderful piece that, multiple pieces that Purple Row put together celebrating his legacy, plus 2023 season outlook for the Colorado Rockies with Skyler Timmins of Purple Row. That's all today on Locked On Rockies.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oop, I guess I hit my button a little early there. But anyway, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast. Rock on Rockies fans. Today is the 28th day of February, the final day of February. And this is the Locked On Rockies podcast where we talk about the Colorado Rockies each and every day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. Today is a great day because we're talking Rockies baseball with Skyler Timmins of the Locked On Rockies podcast. We're going to bring him on in just a second, but wanted to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're free and streaming on your favorite streaming service. You can find us wherever you find podcasts, and you can find the episode first and be part of the live chat, just like Nicholas and Brandon are here in the live chat, where you can ask your questions and get them answered live on the show. Today on Locked On Rockies, we are joined by a very special guest here. It is the one, the only. I know you've read your work. If you've followed this show, you have read Skyler Timmins' work here because that's what we've done. Skyler, thank you so much for taking the time. Why don't we start things off with letting you introduce yourself and telling us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I appreciate having me on. This is really exciting for me, and unfortunate that people have to see my face. They're used to just reading my work and hearing my voice, but now they got to see the face too. But yeah, so I'm Skyler. I'm entering my third season writing over at Purple Row. I do the weekly Wednesday Rock Piles over there. Also help host the Affected by Altitude podcast over there with Evan Lang. And yeah, so that's kind of been the life and times of me is just pouring into Rockies baseball, writing about them, and just trying to find that big break to make it a full-time thing or work in baseball somehow and stuff. But doing stuff like this is the best part of doing everything, especially being over at Purple Row, getting to do stuff like this too. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Absolutely. And we are so excited to have you on. Purple Row is one of our favorite resources here and one of the best in the business for Rockies coverage, folks. If you aren't checking out Purple Row, you're missing out. Skyler, and we're going to talk 2023 Rocks. We're going to talk spring training. There's obviously a lot to talk about. The Rockies currently playing, just came back actually against the Texas Rangers in the spring training game. We will get to current day Rockies, but I wanted to look back first because I want to get more of an insight. And I thought this was really cool. And I'm still reading through it. And I don't want to spoil everything, but let's talk about Don Baylor. You guys did a really cool multi-piece feature on Don Baylor, the first manager for the Colorado Rockies, because we have some new Rockies fans that tune into the pod. They might be new. They might not know this. So, Skyler, tell me a little bit about Don Baylor and what you've learned about him and his impact on the Rockies through your work.
Yeah, I figured it was a perfect opportunity in February, Black History Month, and it's also the 30th anniversary of the Rockies this year, and figured what better time to go back and look at Don Baylor because he was a little bit before my time. I was born in 1996, so I was in the tail end of his career, and I was a baby. I'm not sitting there watching Rockies baseball, remember who he is. So many fans may only know him of, he was a hitting coach, or they may know, he was the first manager. And what was awesome was going back and looking at his career, not just his time as a coach for the Rockies, but really who Don Baylor was as a person and how much of a solid dude he was. He was a great individual. And looking at his legacy, that's the big takeaway that I had, is that Don Baylor was a well-respected, just high-quality human being. And you could see that everywhere he went throughout his life. As a young kid playing baseball and football in Texas, trying to beg for a spot on the team because they only had one available for African-American kids. He was one of the first African-American kids to integrate public schools in Texas back in the 60s. and just continue breaking barriers and just being a leader among men, I think is the big takeaway. He was a leader, and which was just cool to see, and the exact type of guy that the Rockies needed when they started their season in 1993.
And if I recall, I mean, it was, yeah, you those are all the traits you're looking for in a manager. I mean, that's the type of stuff you want when you're looking at someone to lead your team. He is exemplifies that. Is there anything in particular that stuck out to the Rockies of why they decided to go with Don Baylor, or why they wanted to go for him? Was there anything in particular? Was it the on the field? Was it more on the field? Was it off the field? Were the Rockies kind of expansion mind, breaking barrier mindset as well? Why were the Rockies drawn to Don Baylor?
So, from what I could kind of gather, is kind of serendipitous that Bob Gebhardt, the Rockies' first general manager, had actually been the assistant general manager with the Minnesota Twins when the Twins were making a World Series run, surprising everybody, and they decided to trade for a veteran in Don Baylor from the Boston Red Sox, and they go on to win the World Series with Don Baylor helping lead the way. And I think a lot of it goes back to his leadership in the clubhouse. And everywhere he went, he wasn't. He had some really good seasons, but he wasn't, the Hall of Fame talent that you'd look at. But it was his work behind the scenes as a clubhouse leader. He learned a lot from Frank Robinson, and just every team that he went to. That's what I kept seeing quotes of, like, man, Don Baylor, like he's the leader here. And people were kind of, I guess, questioning the move of Don Baylor didn't have any managing experience. And so he was brand new, fresh manager when the Rockies hired him. And I love Bob Gebhardt's quote where I'm willing to roll the dice because I know the man. And that quote really struck me, like, man, Don Baylor is such a solid dude, such a leader in the clubhouse on all these amazing teams, leading them to postseasons and everything else. I think that's what drew the Rockies to him. Of here's a guy who's well respected and demands respect. He commands respect, and he'll get along and lead the ship through these murky waters on this maiden voyage. So I think it was a little bit of both, but more so it was, man, the guy was just a natural born leader.
Well, and you need someone to start things off like that. Like you said, you need someone that's going to command the respect, because it's a whole mix of personalities. It's all, everyone's coming in from somewhere else. You played, everyone played on a different team before you played on this team more often than not. So you need someone like Don Baylor to have that. So what were some other interesting things that we can take away? Because honestly, I don't want to take too much away, because I highly recommend people go read all the stuff so you can get the full thing. But what are the key takeaways from Don Baylor's a tenure with the Rockies? Is there anything we maybe even see today or through the successful years with obviously the Bombers, and then into the Rocktober years? Is there any part of Don Baylor's legacy you can kind of point and connect to these successful moments in Rockies history?
Yeah, I think a big thing, you can tie it back to those early offensive years. That's something the Rockies have kind of turned away from in years past, and kind of the Bud Black managerial era, where it's now a little bit more pitching and defense focused. And that offense we've kind of been missing. And Don Baylor's brand of baseball was very aggressive, high quality contact, aggressive hitter, knew the strike zone well. And that we saw that exemplified through the Blake Street Bombers and everything. And so I think that was the big thing, is his offensive capabilities, his just know-how of how to get the most out of, was instrumental, because he was the hitting coach that helped Dante Bichette fix his career and kind of drew him over to the Rockies. Same with Andres Galarraga, who he found underneath the bleachers at Busch Stadium when he was with the Cardinals. And in his one season as a hitting coach for the Cardinals, he finds Andres Galarraga under the seats crying because he had just had such a rough year and just didn't know if his career was going to go anywhere. Don Baylor opens up his stance, and he becomes the big cat that we know and love today in Colorado lore. So just that offensive mindedness is something that the Rockies could really go back and learn from. Of, man, Don Baylor got some great offense in those early years.
So you're saying Don Baylor's to blame for the Coors Field narrative? That's what you're implying.
No, not at all.
Oh, kidding, of course. But I agree, and look, we're gonna get ready to shift focus to the 2023 Rockies and talk a little bit about that. But again, Purple Row they cover before baseball, the growing up and getting the childhood of Baylor up into his pro career, his time managing. It's a wonderful series features. Please go check it out on Purple Row. But just give me your favorite stat or any of his stats that you loved that stuck with you this whole time, whether it be on the field or during his managerial career. What's the Don Baylor stat that's going to stick with you forever now?
The one thing was how often he got plunked. Like, he led the league in hit by pitches like 6 times in his 19-year career because he would crowded the plate, he was aggressive, and he had no fear because if he gets on base, he's going to swipe second base. So that's the one that really stuck with me is, man, could you imagine 19 years and he's getting plunked as much as he did?
Oof. Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably before the pads, the elbow guards, all that
Yeah.
stuff. It was probably just shrug it off, and that's baseball at that point. But
Mhm.
Don Baylor, an all-time Rockies great. Is there any potential of Baylor getting a little bit more recognition at Coors Field? Maybe, I don't know if a number retirement or something like it just seems like he's the type of guy that the Rockies should do a little, you don't have to do a ton, but when you go to Coors Field, you should be able to go see something Don Baylor related. I don't think that's a stretch to say.
Yeah, and you could say that about so many guys in Rockies history where a Rockies Hall of Fame of some kind definitely need to get that somewhere. Put it at McGregor Square, put it in Coors Field, something. No, put up his initials like Kelly McGregor up there in the banister with the other numbers. No, just something because he was so instrumental to them surviving and becoming a household name in Colorado during that era and putting them on the map.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if that early success was so important. I mean, obviously there's the Rockies legacy and stuff is one that maybe that isn't always associated with greatness, but it set the course for people to love the Rockies, and whether they're fighting with the Dodgers to game 163 or flirting with 100 losses, like you can't say that people don't love the Rockies. And Don Baylor was instrumental in that effort. And I'm really, again, let's go read that, go support there at Purple Row. But let's shift gears. Let's talk 2023 Rockies here. And some interesting things I'm just seeing here from the live chat that we'll have to dive in there as well. But before we dive into current day Rockies here, got to tell you about our friends at Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. Well, what makes them so good? They're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. Not really sure how Built does it, but these bars certainly do taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. What's a macro? Well, that's the stuff you look at. That's the stuff you want to pay attention to and know what you are eating. And most of these Built bars, they've got 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. You can see all the macros and more flavors for yourself at Built.com. But guess what? That's not the only place for Built bars anymore. No. Sam's Club and Walmart, you can go and get yourself a box of your favorite flavor today. And guess what? You can even see more at Built.com. More great flavors, more great options. All that and more at Built.com. You will thank me later. Want to thank you for making Locked On Rockies your first listen of the day. We are free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, and you can make Locked On Fantasy Baseball your second listen of the day if you want to get stay up to date with fantasy baseball. But the Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Nuggets, and Locked On Buffs podcasts have you covered. You can listen to that while reading some of Skyler Timmins' work over at Purple Row. He is our guest today. And Skyler, I'm just seeing from Lux Ace, did Brendan Rodgers get hurt in this game?
Yeah, I saw that too. I guess he dove for a ground ball or something and laid there for a while on the ground, and then he walked off the field. with the trainers and everything. But I think they're still waiting to hear back from that. But man, that wouldn't be good.
Boy, that would take a lot of wind out of my sails, because we're going to talk 2023 Rockies, and Brendan Rodgers is easily he's the top of my list. I mean, there's the prospects I'm the most excited about, but I said this on we were previewing the positions and going through some stuff. I think Brendan Rodgers is going to be the best overall Rocky on the if healthy. Now at this point we'll have to put a question mark there. I think there's an argument to be made for other people, but Skyler, what do you make from this quick start? I titled my episode "Let's Overreact" because I didn't expect the Rockies to come out swinging like this. The offense has been surprising. The Rockies are leaving the yard, which is something that's encouraging. What have you made from just this really early part of spring so far for the Rockies?
It is nice to see that offense, them coming out, making good quality hacks, hitting bombs, not striking out as much, drawing walks. And we were talking about it on the Affected by Altitude podcast too, but they're not hitting as many ground outs. That's a number I'm keeping an eye on because the Rockies can't afford to be back-to-back ground ball champs
Yeah.
in 2023. And so that was something I was keeping an eye on. And they're hitting line drives and getting the ball in the air, which they've seen some long flyouts, guys taking warning track power here in the early goings. So that's nice. But I also try to temper those expectations, or it's the early days of spring training and we haven't been playing. We're not playing the Dodgers yet, or some of those good teams that we have to be a little bit more scared of. Whereas the Brewers, the A's, the Diamondbacks, yes, they're good, but early on in spring training, we're still not as weary of them yet. So I think the Rangers game today is giving them a little bit more of, okay, this is what we have. And their offense is taking off, which is nice to see.
It's got to be the biggest issue for the Rockies. Have to be better on offense this year. I mean, the pitching was an issue last year, sure, but even scarce in depth and some in games where the bullpen did blow it, the Rocky starters did keep them in a lot of games last year. And we know how bad this team has been, especially hitting on the road. But this team's inability to score at home last year cannot be the norm. Do you think this type of this early start of hitting is going to be sustainable at all? And do you think a new hitting coach is really going to bring enough of a difference? Like we said, we're tampering our expectations, but to come out swinging, especially leaving the yard, I think that's something I really want to see more from the Rockies, is home runs, especially this year. Is this sustainable? And how much stake should we put in a new hitting coach for the Rockies?
It's always tough to tell with offensive, like if it can be sustainable, because the Rockies have that unique factor of going on the road and then coming back to Coors Field and all those other factors. If they can figure out a consistent approach and to keep it up, yeah, I think they can do things just nice and fine. And I think Hensley Mullins in his first season, a new hitting coach, I think that is, bring a different philosophy, a different approach to the game. And even beyond that, their expanded R&D department, analytics, it's still not as huge as you'd want it to be as other teams have, but they've revamped that a little bit behind the scenes. And so I think that, in part with a new hitting coach who buys into that and will help relay that information, and guys that are ready and willing to learn and take the advice, I think we can put it's going to help improve that offense, because, man, it's been rough. And like you're saying, I miss home runs at Coors Field. If anything, as rough as those games can be, you got to be able to out-hit your opponent if your pitching isn't up to snuff at times.
The Rockies have to embrace and be willing to win the 12 to 11 games. That is the Rockies' identity. I don't really as much as I don't want that to happen, I want the Rockies to be on the winning side of the shootouts at Coors Field. That's supposed to be your specialty. Mm-hmm. That's supposed to be something you are great at, and make Coors Field as unique and as big of a threat as it is, because it's been more of a weapon to the opponents in the last couple of years. One big thing I've talked a lot this offseason is I'm a little concerned with these prospects and where they're going to fit in with some of these vets and how they're going to get playing time, because if Aelorese Montero isn't playing every day, I'm gonna have a problem with that. But I don't want to. It's the classic thing we always have to talk about. But if he was the big piece of that trade, how are you going to get him on the field? So I'm curious, what do you think the Rockies? How do you think the Rockies handle these prospects, and what do you think the lineup could look like with the Rockies? Because we talked a lot about these things, but I kind of didn't talk enough about these potential utility players for the Rockies. Your Nolan Jones, your Alan Trejos, these potential players that could be sneaking into the lineup as well. I'm just curious, where are the Rockies going to find all these place for all these guys?
Man, if I knew, but it's good. Yeah, it's that tough thing where they try to have their cake and eat it too. Of this is a team that's kind of doing more rebuilding moves, but then also trying to fill up with veterans. And you can't have both because somebody's going to be blocking somebody, and the Rockies and Bud Black are going to lean towards, well, CJ Cron's going to get the start at first base over Montero or Tolia or Jones because he's the guy that we've paid money for. He's our veteran that can hit home runs. And so it kind of a glaring thing of over the offseason, there were some more trades they could have made, more things to shed some fat on the roster, to bring some guys in open spots for him. Because, yeah, Montero needs to play. If he's going to hit, he needs to play. And so it's going to be that shelling for Bud Black, making the lineup. Where can I plug guys? Get guys playing time. I think I saw one thing where early on they're going to try and shuffle guys through, give some rest more often early on to help them down the stretch. So those guys are going to have to make the most of those opportunities because they're probably not going to be coming as often as you'd hope they would.
Are the Rockies setting up for actually doing something at the trade deadline? Are they potentially seeing so they can operate under well, we're always competitive. We got our guys, but then we get to July and, the Rockies, maybe even they're somewhat close, but it's the boat race is on between the Padres and the Dodgers, and the Giants, of course, are just going to be the Giants and annoying and probably way better than they're supposed to be. But is that what they're going to do? Hey, maybe let's build up CJ Cron's trade value, because the way that second half of the season probably killed just about any momentum on a CJ Cron trade. Is that the possibility? I mean, I could see teams being interested in CJ Cron. I could see teams being interested in, Ryan McMahon, and I really don't want him to go this route, in Brendan Rodgers as well. Those are some potential options. Are the Rockies gearing up for potential moves at the deadline? I just have a hard time believing the Rockies will ever do anything at the trade deadline.
Yeah, and you're not alone, and I don't blame you for that. Like, that's how I feel a lot of the times too. And I think it's the players have just got to do something to really force the Rockies' hand of, if you get everybody's performing really well, or some of those prospects that they're really high on are performing really well, or if they get sent down to Albuquerque and they're playing really well, you got to do something to get them in. Because if we're 10 games out of the third wild card spot come mid-July, maybe start shipping off some guys that are playing well or trying to clear some room, because you can't afford that. Let these guys play and see what you've got if you want to compete for the years to come.
Yeah, and especially because you can use that to build up. Just get some draft picks or something. Just do that. That's fine. Just build up around these guys, or just get some near MLB ready prospects. Get some high A, get some double A guys back for these guys that'll be ready to gum up with all these guys. We know Chris Bryant ain't going anywhere. He's going to be the vet there. And one vet too I want to talk to you about, and because this I think might be the one way the Rockies can open up some ways, at least to get them hitting. DH is going to be a fascinating position for the Rockies. I'm curious how much DH you think. Is CJ Cron ever going to fill that role of being the DH so they can let the prospects play first? I'm imagining that's Chuck's place 100%, minus this Grichuk injury. I think that changes a little bit of the approach at the beginning of the season. How will the Rockies use the DH, and will that free up some space for these prospects, either to get some at bats or get on the field to fill in for someone DHing?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's going to be Charlie Blackmon's first and foremost. He's going to be your DH1, and then I think they'll kind of cycle guys through to give them rest. That's the beauty of the DH. Okay, CJ Cron's been out there. but we want to get Montero or somebody some work over there at first base, we'll throw him into the DH spot. Charlie Blackmon can still play right field a couple times a week, maybe.
We
But
hope not. He
yeah,
can.
but he wants to, so they'll stick him
Right.
out there every once in a while. And yeah, the Grichuk injury, who knows how long he'll be out post spring training and everything. So that does open a spot in right field for guys like Nolan Jones, Michael Tolia, maybe to try and break in Brenton Doyle and everything. So they'll kind of use it as Charlie Blackmon, your number one DH, and then we'll cycle guys through as we need to so we can get guys other reps and whatnot.
Who breaks camp with the Rockies, and are you pretty sure it's Tovar time at short?
Yeah, I think all indications Tovar is going to get that opening day spot. Harold Castro, Alan Trejo, Cole Tucker, they're slated for that bench role. That's what they're all fighting over, I think. But Tovar, I think they're committed to that, especially bringing him late in the season last year just for 9 games. Yeah, I think Tovar, that's his spot until it's not, until he struggles enough where they figure, yeah, he needs some more time to cook down in AAA. But all indications, hits a home run today. I think he's ready.
So Montero, Tolia, Montero obviously is going to be up with the Rockies. He will be there, but is Tolia, Bouchard, all these names going to be up with the Rockies to at the end of camp here?
It's tough to say because they all kind of fit into the same category of way too many corner outfielders and way too many corner infielders. And you've got a guy locked up at third base, and you've got CJ Cron here every day at first base. Who fills in everywhere else? It's kind of up in the air. I think Montero will break camp. Maybe a little bit more up in the air with Tolia. He can get some more time down in AAA because he didn't play that much there last year. So he might need some time work down there with Jordan Pacheco and everything. And then Bouchard is kind of the toss-up here where he's shown good stuff, can play left field, fill in for Chris Bryant, but then he's also kind of in that same camp with Tolia and Montero of, well, where do we put him and where he can be successful? Is he the new Connor Joe this year where he fills that spot? Who knows?
Connor Joe. Good times. Good times. Skyler, let's talk projections, and I want to talk a little bit about newness in baseball here for the Rockies coming up here in our third segment. Folks, this is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day, free and streaming on your streaming service. Quick little check-in on the live chat. Sorry, folks, I know I haven't been talking to you too much, but I've been talking to Skyler here. That's the point of these guests, is we got to talk to the experts here. Luxe says, I think we go in 70 games or more this season, and Skyler, we'll dive into that. But here's from Nicholas Delvo. Baylor was great. He knew how to get the best out of his players. It's too bad they couldn't win the World Series. There were just too many good teams back then, but the fact they got there so early. And then Cassidy Dean says, all aboard the Veen machine. Zach Veen is very exciting, but I don't think we'll see him until closer to middle of the year, second half of the season is my guess. For it. Would you agree?
Yeah, he's got to go conquer the beast of Double-A Hartford and then spend some time in Albuquerque, and then around maybe like August or so he can ride the Tolia trend of last year and play out September and stuff.
I really do. If the Rockies are out of it, I really hope they embrace that. Let the young kids play in the second half like they did last year. It actually made me more excited as a Rockies fan. It made me want to watch, but the Rockies weren't great last year, and people aren't very high on the Rockies this year, Skyler, and I think that they are rightfully so, but the Rockies have been kind of getting skewered from an outside perspectives and from some people in Denver as well for a lackluster offseason, not competing and spending like the Padres and the Dodgers. And while I think the criticisms are fair and earned for the Rockies and the front office, I think some people might be missing the point. What's your projections for the Rockies this year? What do you think the Rockies will accomplish this year? I say my ceiling is everything goes well and they squeak into the third wild card. More realistically, I think they're a 72-win team that surprises some people and is a thorn in the side of the NL West. I'm curious what you think the outlook for the 2023 Colorado Rockies looks like.
Yeah, something that I think is best case scenario is that they kind of go the route of the Orioles did last year, where they start bringing in some of the younger guys, And the Orioles were competitive last year. They were fighting for that wild card. They were within sniffing distance of it. And I think the Rockies can follow suit with that. We're not going to make the play. That third wild card's going to be just a little bit out of reach. But I think 75 wins as like the max. I think that's kind of the upper echelon that they should aim for. And I think they could get to that. Somewhere between up to 75. I think 72 is a good prediction because to tie it back to Don Baylor, he was kind of prophetic in that first season where everybody was telling him you're going to lose 100 games first year as a new team. And he's like, I can't accept that. 100 losses, I can't accept that. And he's like, we're not going to lose 100 games. And almost prophetically, they still haven't lost 100 games. And so I got to be a big believer in that.
And I don't think the team got worse this offseason. In fact, I'd argue the team got better this offseason. I think a healthy Chris Bryant will change the game for the Rockies. I don't think it's necessarily a landscape altering, but those close ball games are going to feel a heck of a lot better when Chris Bryant is coming up in the bottom of the ninth or something like that than what the Rockies were throwing out there in terms of offense, especially on the road. And I'm kind of refreshed by this new wave of utility players. It's a bummer, Hilliard and Hampson and Connor Joe all were fun and had their unique things, but we saw what the potential was. We saw what happened. I'd argue maybe the concerns are the rotation, I think, but I'm a Herman and Kyle fan. We've seen how great those guys can be. I think German Marquez still has the potential to throw the second no-hitter in Rockies history. That was maybe I cursed him last year because that was my great hot take of last year. But your concerns for the Rockies this year, what are the issues that they're going to face? And how do you think that they'll be able to handle the lows that come with the 162 game season?
Yeah, I think the big focus on the offseason was building pitching depth. And you see all the guys that they brought in, yeah, they're not headliners or they're not going to be lighting up any they're not going to be the main attraction anybody's coming to the ballpark to see. But there's still some good quality pitching in there. And so when you're going to have lulls in the season, guys are going to struggle to have the opportunity of, okay, we can call in this guy, see what he's got. That's going to be the name of the game, is just how can they remain confident and productive? They're going to have some bad outings. How can you rebound from that? Because we saw that with Herman last year. He had so many bad starts, a rough first half, and then he'd start to get back up on a good trend back to the Herman knew. So it's going to be, when the bad times come, their mental fortitude, how can they overcome that and take it back up to the next level and don't let things spiral out of control? Because we saw that so often last year where 2-game losses become 3-game losses. All of a sudden they've lost 7 in a row type of thing. How can you stop those slides, get back, get out of the slump and whatnot? Maybe then you get Jason Giambi's gold thong with him all the time. Who knows?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think one big thing too, it's going to be nice that the Rockies are going to be able to turn to some good vets. I think getting the Nilson Lamet and Brent Suter are steals, honestly, for the Rockies. I mean, that's low risk, easy and veteran. Now you feel a little bit better because the Rockies had to turn to so many people that were like, he's making his debut. He just pitched in Albuquerque yesterday. And it's just like all this stuff the Rockies were going to go through. We're running a little long, so I want to wrap things up on one final question. And one thing I really have been getting an impact. I've really liked asking people their feedback on. I love the new balanced schedule. I think it's a really great thing for teams like the Rockies. I'm curious, just your thoughts on balanced schedule, your rule changes and everything. I kind of think this is I'm seeing it now. The steps are in the right direction. We will get used to the pitch clock. I know we will, but balanced schedule, new changes. What do you think of the 2023 baseball, the state of baseball, I should say?
I love the introduction of the balanced schedule. I think Rockies fans all around will rejoice because it means less games against the NL West. So that's a little better. And you just get to see other teams that you hardly ever get to see. The Yankees are going to come to Coors Field, so Dick Monfort's probably counting on that day to fill his pockets.
Already advertising it on spring training. They've already talked about the Yankees coming to town.
Yeah. You're going to have Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani come to Coors Field. You're going to see teams that you don't normally see, and also some teams that are struggling. You can compete against them, get some wins, and kind of help your record a little bit. So I like the balanced schedule. Pitch clock, I am a fan of it. It still needs some kinks worked out. I don't think like the Manny Machado getting it to start the at bat. You don't need to rush into the box and stuff. I think Daniel Bard had a ball called on him because Brian Serven was a little late coming out to the catcher's spot or whatever. So there's some kinks that need to be worked out. But I'm a fan of the pitch clock because after you've worked in some minor league baseball and have to sit through a 4-hour game where you lose 20-10 or something, yeah, you'll gladly take a pitch clock. And then the big one will be the no shift rule. I think that's the one that's really going to have to keep an eye on of how does this help the offense at all? Maybe some of those ground outs turn into singles through the left side or through the right side for Charlie Blackmon and Ryan McMahon. So overall, I'm good with the rule changes. The pickoff one's weird. That'll take getting used to, but everything else, I'm fine dandy with some of those things that are getting implemented.
That just means the Rockies have one less excuse to not try to steal more bases, which we've already seen a little bit. Skyler, there was plenty more I wanted to talk to you about, but we're out of time today. That just means we'll have to catch up again. Where can they go to support you and support the work that you do?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at sideline_crowd. I'm usually making jokes over there on the Twitters. Every once in a while, I'll make a meme. And then over on Purple Row, I write Wednesday rock piles, and then I pick up the news articles as they happen and whatnot. But usually find me over there on Purple Row, purplerow.com. Every Wednesday, I'm writing my articles. And you can also catch me on the Affected by Altitude podcast. New episodes every Monday over there with my buddy Evan Lang, two of us holding the fort down and everything. So, yeah, go give it a listen. We're also on YouTube. Find us on the Purple Row channel with our video version of the podcast.
There we go. We love it. And again, Purple Row, big time friend of us because I use Purple Row every day when I'm doing stuff in the season. Wonderful breakdowns of everything you need for Rockies. Skyler, thank you so much for the time. This has been your Locked On Rockies podcast for today. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. Now go check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast or the Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, or Locked On Nuggets podcast. Until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.